Here, a new episode of Soloing Secrets, and this is Buddy Guy, and I've definitely had a ton of requests to feature this living blues guitar legend. Buddy Guy is an icon, very respected, very influential. He's been on the scene since around 1953, and he's released 19 studio albums, 4 EPs, 15 live albums, not to mention doing a lot of work behind the scenes with, absolute legends of blues. You got to think, Muddy Waters, Bo Diddley, Coco Taylor, Howlin' Wolf. I mean, there's a bunch of people that Buddy appears on albums with, but then Buddy has his own records too. Definitely an essential legend of the guitar. And then here are some quotes from famous guitarists about Buddy Guy. Check it out. Hendrix and Clapton, Jeff Beck, Keith Richards. The respect for Buddy Guy is everywhere. So just like we've done in other episodes in the Soloing Secrets series, when you're checking out a certain guitarist or band, it's always a good idea to check out their influences, because that's going to reveal certain things they like to do in their music, playing habits and techniques and bending moves and stuff like that. But anyway, here's an image with Buddy Guy's elusive musical influences. Now, as far as Buddy's soloing secrets, the things he typically likes to do when he grabs a guitar, plays a lick or a fill or a solo, and there's a lot. There's traditional and modified blues phrasing, lots of pentatonic scales and hybrid pentatonics, blues scales and stuff, expressive bending, emotive vibrato, lots of dynamics. Sometimes he plays real quiet and then he starts grabbing notes really loud. The in-between settings on a Strat, too. That's one thing that's really noticeable about Buddy's playing, is the color of different tones and sounds he gets from his Strat. And he'll move between neck to bridge, but then he also spends times like in those in-between places, like setting 2, 3, and 4, those glassy Strat tones. That's a big part of Buddy's sound, and it's really interesting to hear him kind of milk those tones and sounds out of his guitar. Very influential, and here's his soloing secrets. Now, as far as the music and examples in this episode, I basically pulled everything from Buddy's second album, A Man in the Blues. That's a classic album, definitely very influential, very respected. And it's really interesting, even though he's released a lot of albums, he really only released 2 albums in the 60s, 2 albums in the 70s. And it's like a sprinkle of albums, like in the 80s and then the 90s. And then in recent years, since the 21st century started, he's definitely been issuing albums, with more regularity. But in the early years, it was really sparse. A couple live albums, a couple studio albums here and there. And then his legacy just continued to grow and grow. But anyway, everything in this episode came from A Man in the Blues. Just a heads up. Okay, with the opening jam, that was basically me playing around with jam on a Monday morning, even though it's technically a Thursday afternoon here. But that's the last song from A Man in the Blues. Basically a blues in C, and the riff, like the rhythm part, that's like a C7. grab the F root note right there, and then hop up and grab an F7 right there. Back to C7, and then G7 the same way you did F. Grab the root note, and then the chord on top, and then F, and then back to C. So pretty straightforward. I was using the MXR clone looper there to kind of help me out with that rhythm part. And then eventually you distinctly hear Buddy do something like this. Right? And that's a very signature lick or move. And definitely Stevie Ray Vaughan and tons of other guitarists kind of lifted this from Buddy. So think of like C minor pentatonic, right? So right there we're basically grabbing notes from C minor pentatonic, and we're also sliding into the flat 5 right there, that G flat. We're also hybrid picking and grabbing that top C note, you know, on the high E. Right? And you can definitely hear kind of moving in and out of that flat 5, but that high C note might be kind of camouflaged to your ear, but it is in there. And then you can definitely hear him phrase with that and target the F when he goes to F7. Right? And that's one big thing about Buddy's playing style is targeting over the chord progression. You know, waiting for just the right moment and then hitting just the right note at just the right time. And that's a good example of that. You know, targeting C and then waiting for that F. And right there you're targeting, you know, that F note when it goes to F. And then waiting for it to go back to C again, right? And then eventually, let's see, I was definitely jamming during that that intro opening jam. Just playing licks and trying to channel some Buddy Guy. That wasn't note for note by any means. But then when it goes to G, you know, kind of targeting, you know, G7, targeting the F7. And then moving into some of those glassier sounds. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in this lesson. But it has that real glassy, kind of shimmery sound, right? And just listening to like those differences in your tone. You know, just depending on what pickup you're using on your guitar. Very expressive, very interesting too to hear that colorization in the sound and the tone of the guitar. That's Buddy Guy. Okay, next up's the opening to the song, A Man in the Blues, the first song from the album. And this lick that opens the song actually appears in 2 other songs, and we're going to talk about those songs too. But the opening of A Man in the Blues is like this. Like a real slow blues, right? One more time. You know, really cool lick here, and it's targeted. You know, it's kind of camouflaged as far as what he's doing. But with that opening lick, that's a very famous blues lick, of course. Right? Grabbing the root, minor and major third. You're also grabbing the 6th right there, grabbing the root again, and then you're changing where that root is located. And you can hear Buddy doesn't slide into that. That is kind of a common way to hear a slide into that note. But Buddy doesn't do that. He just goes from one C to the other. Like that. And kind of a smear bend on that E flat. And then a big bend on that F to G and hang on to it. And then you're going to basically bend that F up to G, release that bend, and then you're going to pull off that F to E, grab C, and then you're going to do E flat, or E flat to E. Like that. And it's really cool to hear that major third in there. because you're basically pulling off to it and then you're hammering onto it like that. You know, really expressive lick right there. Okay, next up are some examples of how Buddy might target a 1-4-5 progression, you know, like a blues progression, and targeting licks and phrases over the chords he's playing over. So let's just stay in that same progression, that 1-4-5 and C. You know, C7, F7, and G7, right? And let's borrow that same lick, but let's modify it ever so slightly. The same lick we had in The Man in the Blues, right here. Well, let's do it like that. Instead of going up to this higher position, let's just stay right there. And right there, I'm targeting over C or C7, right? Because I'm basically, you know, serving up that minor to major third, but I'm ending on C, the root. Over the 1 chord. Let's say it moves to the 4 chord, F7, right? So we're going to keep everything the same, but we're going to change that last note to that F. That means we're targeting, you know, over that F7. So right there was the C targeted lick, the F targeted lick, and then what about that G when it goes to the 5 chord? There's a crafty way to do it right here. And it's going to feel like the blues scale, like that. So right there you can see we're ending on that G. And then back to F. And back to C. So that's kind of a basic example of how Buddy, you know, might target chords and target the progression he's playing over. That's really expressive, and it really helps you connect your licks and phrases to the chords, you know, in the progression that you're playing over. Okay, next up's the opening to the song Worry, Worry, and this is actually in the same key as A Man in the Blues, and it has the exact same intro. It's just everything after that initial lick is different, like this. You know, something like that. Same lick. And then right there you hear him grab C and G together like a double stop. And then he grabs that E flat and kind of smear bends it. So that's really cool. And then you hear this F to G, hold it. And then you're going to basically release that bend, that E flat to that C. And then you hear this really fast pull-off slide, like that. And Buddy would do stuff like that all the time. Like these little kind of quick licks and stuff. But right there. Next up's a rake bending lick from Worry, Worry. And this is really cool, like this. Kind of short and sweet, but something like that. And I really like raked, you know, bending like that percussive kind of muted sound. So right there, we're going to basically rake, you know, pick or kind of almost sweep into that F note and bend it to G, like that. And then that F, E flat, F, and then grab that C. And then you're going to rake again into that E flat. And then you're going to rake again into that F and bend it to G, like that. You know, really expressive and really dynamic too, because you hear that percussive, you know, kind of raked sound before the bend. Okay, next up's the opening to Sweet Little Angel, and this is a B.B. King cover, and it actually uses the same lick that we've already seen twice in this lesson so far, but instead of C7, now we're in D7, right? And we're doing this. You know, something like that. So the same lick we already had in C, but now we're in D. Right there. So you're going to grab that D, kind of milk bend that F there twice. And then you're going to basically grab this G, bend it to A, and hold it. And then like that. those held bends are a big part of Buddy's bending style, and just letting it kind of sustain and be held, but it's not overly distorted. It's almost clean, right? That's really hard to do. You got to grab that note and hang on to it to hear it continue to ring like that. So it's deceptively really hard because you don't have a bunch of gain and compression and all these effects and stuff. You're really reliant on just grabbing those notes and milking them and let them sustain naturally, which is really hard to do. Now, speaking of those held bends, here's a raked held bend from Sweet Little Angel, like this. That's really hard to do because you're holding on to that with no gain or overdrive like I was saying earlier. It's a lot of control, a lot of, just kind of grabbing that note and not letting go. That's deceptively really hard to do with a slight, overdrive, basically a clean tone, really. Okay, last but not least are 3 licks from the song Just Playing My Axe. And the first 2 are kind of stock blues licks. It's the last one that has that kind of quirky bending from Buddy Guy. But the first lick's like this. And he's using that glassy, position 4 on the Strat, like that. You can hear it in the tone. It has that really kind of glassy bell-like sound. So there's lick 1 right there, kind of built out of E minor pentatonic here. I guess I should have mentioned this is in the key of E now. But right there. And then this one, like that. So there's the first one, the second one, and then this last lick right here, this has this really crazy giant bending going on. Like that. It's really hard to do. I'm using 10s on my guitar. I'm guessing Buddy might be using 9s maybe, or maybe he's using 10s. I have no idea. But right there, that's the last lick. And that's really tough because we're coming out of that same position of E minor pentatonic. Then you're going to grab that A note, you're going to kind of bend it like maybe a quarter step, just a little smear, and then a half step, a whole step, a step and a half. And then you're going to end up 2 whole steps higher, like that. And then end with, you're kind of going back to that E note. Really exaggerated, and it's kind of cool to hear that gradual bend. And then for that bend, you definitely need to reinforce, I've got my thumb kind of, anchored there on the side of the fretboard, and I'm pushing, that string up, and I definitely have, fingers to reinforce that bend. But it's very possible you could break a string, you could hurt your hand or your finger too, if you're not quite ready, if you don't quite have it, kind of, backed up over there, because I am using leverage from my thumb to kind of help me push. That's a big bend. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Soloing Secrets with this look at Buddy Guy. Definitely an absolute living blues guitar legend. I'm a big fan, and he is one of the last remaining original blues masters. I mean, you got to think Albert and BB and Freddie are gone, not to mention John Lee Hooker and Muddy Waters, and that original gang of blues guitarists. We've also lost Jeff Beck, recently too. So it's interesting to notice that Buddy is still out there. He's walking around literally, just an encyclopedia of blues, music and the history and so many important people, that he worked with. And it's really interesting. I was definitely kind of intimidated putting this together. It's like, wow, Buddy Guy is huge. And there's so many players that absolutely love Buddy Guy. Eric Clapton for one, for sure. But, Stevie Ray Vaughan definitely got into Buddy, covered, Mary Had a Little Lamb and stuff. Definitely very exciting, and just like I said, it's a historic guitarist, very important. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.